Hello everyone, and welcome to this introductory video on how to use REDCap at Athabasca University. This video will walk you through creating basic measures using REDCap. The purpose of this video is to introduce creating questions or variables using the REDCap tool. By the end of this video, you should know how to create questions in REDCap, know how to copy, edit, move, and delete questions in REDCap, and be familiar with skip logic in REDCap. Once you're in your project, to start designing measures, click on Online Designer under the Design Your Data Collection Instrument step. This will take you to a new page that already has a Form 1 started for you. To begin, click on Form 1. Again, this will take you to a new page. First off, note that REDCap automatically embeds a record ID variable into a measure in order to track participants or unique interactions with the project or data collection. The record ID variable can't be deleted or moved. It automatically appears as the first field or variable in any project, but it can be edited. So for example, you can change the name of the variable if you want to. Also, this record ID variable does not appear as a question when participants view the measure, so they don't actually see it, but it is included in any data downloads. To add a new variable, click Add Field. This will bring up a box that contains all the options in REDCap for creating a variable. If you click on Field Type, you'll see all the possible kinds of variables. The most common ones include multiple choice with either radio or drop-down options, checkboxes or multiple response, slider or visual analog scales, short text responses that can be used to capture short replies, dates, phone numbers, emails, things like that, and note boxes or longer text responses, paragraphs, things like that. The options for creating a field will vary depending on what field type you select. For example, let's start with the multiple choice radio buttons option. Variable name is where you specify the name of this specific variable. This is how your variable name will appear in your dataset. Note that REDCap does have rules about how to name variables, mostly to make sure that your variable names will play nicely with the various stats software out there. But if you include a character that's not allowed, for example a period, REDCap will automatically correct it for you. Field label is where you enter the variable name or question text as it will appear to your participant. If you enable the rich text editor, you'll have more options for formatting this text. And the final box, choices, is where you enter the label and code for each multiple choice option. So for example, say that you want to know participant sex and want the responses to be male, female, or non-binary, and code them as 0, 1, and 2 respectively. Note that REDCap does have a specific way to code those multiple responses, but if you're not sure about how to code something in REDCap, it does have help boxes scattered throughout, including a how do I manually code the choices option here. But for the purposes of coding these responses, you indicate responses by first typing the numeric code for that category, then the comma, and then the text. So for male responses, you type 0, comma, and then male. Each row represents a different response, and REDCap will display the response options in the order that you enter them. There are a few other important features on this page. First is the required option. If you select this, then a participant cannot move on to the next question or section of your surveys until a response is provided. And next is the identifier option. If you select this, then you're telling REDCap that there is identifying or confidential information collected in this variable, such as names, birth dates, healthcare numbers, and so on. When you go to download the data, REDCap will automatically exclude or scramble any variables that are marked as identifier, unless specifically asked not to by the downloader. Let's look at another field type. If you select text box, for example, then the choices box disappears, but a validation box or option does appear. The validation option can be used to check whether a participant's response fits a specific response format. So for example, if you're collecting information on dates or times, phone numbers, emails, or postal codes, selecting this validation option will have REDCap show the participant how a response should be formatted, such as date should be entered as day, month, and year, and then it will also check the response to make sure it matches the formatting and alert the participant if it doesn't. So selecting this validation option, if applicable, can save you data cleaning down the line. Here is an example of what a participant would see for a variable that, say, captured birth dates. We formatted the variable to accept a specific date format to make sure everyone fills in the information consistently. You can see that the format is shown under the question. Moreover, if the participant deviates from that format, REDCap will alert them to the issue and ask them to enter their response again. Let's look at the visual analog next. Note that selecting this option results in more fields at the bottom of the box that can be used to customize the visual analog slider. So for example, it allows you to select the beginning, middle, and end values to decide whether participants see those values or not, and minimum and maximum values for your visual analog scale. Finally, let's look at the notes box option. Unless specified, REDCap does not put a limit on how long a response can be using this field. If you want to limit how long a text response can be, you should use the Action Tags field annotation box at the bottom of the screen. If you're already familiar with REDCap, you can just start typing your action tags into the red box. If not, you can see all the action tags in REDCap by clicking on the Action Tags text red button at the bottom. As you can see, there are a lot of options, but for the purposes of this example, we're just going to focus on the @char_limit action tag. REDCap provides a description on how to use this, but essentially, you type @char_limit equals into the action tag box, followed by whatever maximum character limit you choose. There's also a way to limit words rather than characters using the @word_limit action tag, which works the same way except the value you indicate is for the maximum number of words. Note that the participant will see a note under this field or question indicating the character or the word limit. And just as an example, this is what it would look like for the participant if there's a character or word limit put on a notes box field or question. And this is what would happen if they entered a response above that character or word limit. And just briefly, here are some other useful fields to be aware of. First, the calculated field can be used to calculate something directly in REDCap. For example, someone's current age using their reported birth date and the current date. This is particularly handy if the kind of questions shown could depend on how old someone is. Like for example, if you had school-related questions versus work questions. Calculated fields can also be hidden from the participant, pretty much operating in the background or invisibly, using the @hidden action tag. The signature field allows the participant to sign the field in REDCap directly using either the mouse or their finger. The file upload field allows users to upload files or documents. The descriptive text field's a little bit different because it doesn't capture data. Instead, this field is a way to display text or embed additional information, videos, or images into the survey. And finally, the Begin New Section field can be used to create breaks between sets of questions or spread them over multiple pages instead of having them all in one page. This field can be also used to display text that introduces or explains a new section. Once you've specified everything for your variable or field, click Save at the bottom of the box. REDCap will take you back to the preceding page, now with the new variable listed. It will also have a rough depiction of the question, including the variable name, the field label, or question text, and for example, showing the radio buttons or the text box. Note that each question is contained within a unique box, and there are symbols in the upper left corner that allow you to edit or move the questions. So for example, clicking on the pencil allows you to edit the question. This will reopen the field design box. Clicking on the overlapping sheets of paper will copy the field or question. To demonstrate, let's copy the sex-gender question. As you can see, REDCap automatically gives the copied question a new variable name, and you can edit that by clicking on the pencil. And this feature comes in really handy when you have multiple similar questions, like from a same measure, and you can copy the questions and edit the small differences rather than having to create whole new variables for each question. Clicking on the paper icon with the drag icon allows you to move the questions. Questions can be moved in two ways in REDCap. So the first way is to click on this icon, which will bring up a Move Field box that includes a list of questions across all of the measures, not just the ones in this particular survey. You can use the drop-down list to indicate where you want the question to be moved to. Alternatively, you can click and drag a question to where you want it to go, and REDCap will automatically reorder everything. Note, though, that you can't click and drag questions across measures or surveys. You have to use the paper icon to do that. Clicking on the green arrows allows you to add branching logic. For example, say that I want participants to tell me the name of their tutor if they are registered in Psych 289. It doesn't make sense to ask this question if participants are not registered in Psych 289. So to make the tutor question only visible to those students in Psych 289, click the green arrow on the tutor question. That will bring up the branching logic box. If you're feeling fancy, you can type the branching logic syntax directly into the first field. But if you're not feeling fancy or you're new to REDCap, you can click drag and drop at the bottom. All of the possible branching logic options are listed on the left. All you have to do is select the one you need and drag it over to the right. Here, we only want the tutor question to appear to participants who indicate that they are registered in Psych 289 or for which that is a true response. Click Save, and you can now see the branching logic indicated in the field box in red letters. Now the question about Psych 289 tutors will only appear if a participant indicates that they are registered in Psych 289. Even better, if you go back into the skip logic for the tutor question, you'll see that REDCap translated your drag and drop into advanced branching logic syntax. So that means you can copy or type out your branching logic going forward if you want to save on time. The stop sign can be used to create stop actions within a given survey or measure based on that question. Note that the stop sign or stop action option only appears for surveys that are enabled, or for which there is a survey link that allows data entry outside the REDCap app or website, or without logging into REDCap. To create stop actions, click on the stop sign. A new window will appear. Select which question options would result in the participant being prompted to end the survey. This can be used, for example, to manage inclusion or exclusion criteria. For example, if your study is focused on psych program students only, then a response that indicates the participant is not a program student would cause a survey to stop for that person. Note that there are additional options for stop logic that need to be specified in the survey settings page. The survey settings page is discussed more in another video. Here, if we select a response as a stop option and save, you'll see that End Survey now appears next to that response option. And lastly, you can also delete the field or the question by clicking on the red X. In addition to individual questions, it's also possible to create a matrix or table of questions. For example, say that you have a questionnaire with 10 different questions and each question has the same set of responses. Rather than having separate questions for each, you can create a matrix or table of questions. To create a matrix, click on Add Matrix of Fields. At the top of the Add Matrix of Fields window, you'll see a text box where you can add additional information. For example, if there are additional instructions for your measure, or if you want participants to respond to the questions thinking about a specific time window, you can enter that information here. Below the matrix header are the matrix rows. This is where you can type in the individual questions. For example, say that this is a depressive symptom measure. The first question might be, I feel sad most days. That would be typed into the field label. The variable name goes in the next box, say DEP1, and then there are other options. You can add question numbers, make a response required, and add annotations. To add the next question or another row, click on Add Another Row and do the same until all the questions are entered. Next, fill in the question responses in the Matrix Column Choices box. The syntax is the same as for the multiple choice field. So you indicate the numerical value that you want the response to have, a comma, and then the text, and each possible response has its own row and it will be displayed in that order. There are additional options for matrix variables. So for example, you can choose between radio buttons or single responses, or check boxes or multiple responses. You can also select a ranking option, and this will mean that participants can only have one response per column. So for example, you would use this if you wanted them to rank different responses. And lastly, you have to give it a matrix group name. So for example, if this was a depressive symptom measure, I might call this matrix DEP. Click Save. And note that these matrix questions can be modified similar to the regular variables or fields. You can edit by clicking on the pencil, move by clicking on the paper, and delete by clicking on the X. And you can also create skip logic for each variable or question by clicking on the green arrows, or create stop actions for the survey by clicking on the stop sign. Throughout the design process, if you want to see how the measure will appear to a participant, you can click the Preview Instrument box option. Just be aware that this does not necessarily show you all the skip logic or survey formatting. You can also test your survey or measure by going to the Survey Distribution Tools option on the left navigation pane and clicking the survey link. But note that this will not appear as an option until you've enabled the survey, and we'll talk about how to do that in the next video. This concludes our introduction to creating fields or questions in REDCap. The following video will go into more detail on how to organize these items into surveys.